up, Shakers? Today we're here with Andrew from choozle. Andrew, thanks for joining the Handshaking video series. Today we're here wearing the Handshaking sunglasses, where you can come pick your free pair by applying to the Handshaking pre-accelerator here in Denver, Colorado. And that's what we got for you. So, Andrew, to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my company choozle's in the digital media space, and I actually started in the digital media space pretty much out of college. So back in '99, moved out to California, ended up in the Bay Area, and you know, I thought I was going to get into finance and banking because that's what I had studied in undergrad. But luckily, it was the kind of the rise of the first big internet wave, and jumped into the business side of the internet, which is basically marketing and advertising. And yeah, jumped into a company in San Francisco, one of the early ad networks. Learned a ton. We grew really quickly, actually went public, and then we're pretty much out of business within 6 months because of the bubble in 2001. And so learned a lot about how quickly companies can grow and how quickly they can go away.
Wow.
Jumped into another digital media focused company on the Bay Area, opened up an office for them in San Francisco. Yeah, then jumped down to Southern California, went to grad school at UCLA, got my MBA down there. Came out, worked for a bigger digital media company called IAC, or Interactive Corp, Barry Diller's large conglomerate. Mostly on the sales side, leveraging sales teams to generate revenue. We would sell a lot into advertising agencies, leveraging the IAC properties, which at the time included Expedia, Ticketmaster, some brands that are still around like Evite, CitySearch, maybe not to a degree. And yeah, so kind of continued my career growth there. It was my first kind of management stop where I managed a sales team on the West Coast. And then from there jumped into the startup world. I had a good buddy who had a marketing software startup where we built communities for major brands. Jumped in, headed up sales and biz dev for them out of LA. A lot of great experience selling into the higher levels of organizations. So we closed and operated some great deals with American Express and Nike and Disney. So it gave me a lot of experience kind of for a more sophisticated buyer at the C-level at those companies. Was there for about 2 years, and at that time I moved out to Colorado. As with most people, I was most interested in the lifestyle in Colorado. It just happened to have a very kind of fledgling internet and startup ecosystem, which I became a part of. When I moved out here, I actually jumped in and started my first company with some partners based in California still, and we had an online ad network. So we essentially aggregated existing websites, mostly from existing publishers on the newspaper and magazine space, combined them together as digital assets. Then we would go to agency and sell that product. And it was around that time that I got involved in the local startup community here with the precursor to Startup Colorado, which was Startup Denver, along with Eric Matisse and a host of others that kind of pioneered in the space. Yeah, and then through, did about 2.5 years with that company. We grew it to a pretty good scale, about 10 million in about 3 years with no outside funding. Eventually took an exit and then jumped in with my current partner, Jeff Finch, who heads up our product and technology side. And yeah, we originally were just kicking around ideas. We weren't sure what we were going to build together. But eventually choozle kind of came into focus, and we've been at it for about 3 years now. We raised our angel round in the fall of 2012 in October, so we're coming up on kind of 3 years since then.
Wow.
And yeah, we just kind of, you know, followed the path of our product and have built a great team around it. And now we operate the leading self-service digital media platform in the programmatic space. It's a SaaS platform that we sell on to advertising agencies, also other publishers, digital publishers, that helps them buy and sell digital media through our platform.
Very cool. So now walk me through it. What year was it when you moved to Colorado?
So I moved here in 2008.
2008?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you said you were part of this other startup. I was kind of curious, how many team members were at that startup?
You know, it was carved out of an existing company. So we only had a handful of full-time employees, but had the resources of the other company. So I think by the time I left, we had 5 full-time. The sister company had about 15 to 20 employees total.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and then more recently in your career, is that the first time you had gotten into entrepreneurial endeavors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, depending on how you define it, you know, through high school and college, I had a few small businesses. In college, we had a dock building business. I grew up on a lake, so that was probably my first business that actually made some money. And so, you know, I've always had kind of that interest in entrepreneurship, ever since I was little. I think I almost knew I was going to hopefully start a business and grow it to some scale at some point. And so the first kind of real taste I had was jumping into the startup in LA. And I think I was the 8th employee there, and it was venture-backed. They just raised their seed round. So it gave me a good taste of startup life, technology company, one that was semi-funded, and kind of learned some of the early operations of how to get a company to scale.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So how much did that play into the success you guys have reached here at choozle? What are some of the key takeaways you learned from working for someone else's startup that you took to yours?
Absolutely. I'd say the 2 startups I worked at prior to choozle, again, one I started, one I came in as an early employee, they're very different. The first one was venture-backed. We probably had a higher burn rate than was necessary. We probably invested a little too much on the marketing side, a little too much probably on building out the team. And as you know, building out sales and biz dev can be very expensive when you're talking about salaries and travel. So it was probably could have been a little bit leaner. I would have. And by the time I left, we had scaled and had some great clients, and they still exist. So the second one was very, very bootstrapped, almost the exact opposite. We took almost no outside funding, very low or no salaries at the beginning, and kind of scaled it up from there. So you learn the benefits of both. I think the key for me on that side was, with the startup, I guess the scale and the size of the startup and momentum all have to kind of match. You can get away with being leaner and more startup-like if you have momentum. Because the key there is you're going to be able to attract talent that feel like you're going somewhere. If you don't have much momentum or acceleration or revenue growth and you're still under market, it's going to be unlikely they're going to be able to attract and retain high quality people. But I would say constant on both sides is just that, the ability to find, train, retain high quality individuals on the team is by far the most important. So I kind of learned the building blocks of culture and how important it was from those 2 companies. And that's something that we spend a lot of time here at choozle emphasizing, is making sure we have a strong culture.
Yeah, that's really exciting. In fact, I want to go a little deeper on that note before we move on to our first topic of community. What type of questions do you ask potential team members that are joining your startup? Like, is it important that they have previous startup experience for most roles?
No, we really, and it depends on the role, of course. I think if it's an engineer, having some sort of startup experience is helpful because it's definitely likely to be a less structured environment and less, myopic in terms of their focus. At startup, everyone wears a lot of hats, so you want to make sure, especially on the engineering side, people are comfortable with that, moving from project to project. On the business side of things, and again, my partner handles more of the product and technology side, and I'm spending more time on the business side, although we connect on product on a daily basis. We look for a certain type of person that's smart, intellectually curious, self-starter that can get things done, and quite frankly wants to have a good time with their career. Everyone that we bring in at choozle, I tell them, one of the first things we talk about is, I know this isn't going to be your only job. It's unlikely for us to become IBM and your lifer here. So we want to create a work environment that's challenging, interesting, fun. They feel like they're advancing their skill sets. But again, I keep coming back to the idea of, life is really short. So if you're not enjoying the people you're working with and what you're doing, you don't find it interesting, people will not stick around that long. And we've been very lucky. We've had almost 100% retention since we started 3 years ago, which we're really excited about. And for me, that's great because you get to build a real strong rapport with your team. And obviously the business upsides in terms of retention are very tangible in terms of the cost of recruiting and retention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So community, Andrew, could you tell us, you talked a little bit about Startup Denver and Startup Colorado.
Yep.
Before you joined that community, could you talk to us about any communities you were a part of in California?
Yeah, so most industries will have their individual communities. So I was definitely involved in both San Francisco and Los Angeles in the digital marketing community. While I was at UCLA getting my MBA, they had a strong entrepreneurship focus and an entrepreneurship community where they would bring in very successful entrepreneurs. I remember they brought in the guy who essentially invented the spin brush, the first kind of affordable electronic toothbrush, and he grew it to a massive business and sold it to one of the big players for like $200 million in a matter of a few years. And again, that was just kind of an example of the exposure in that community that you got to very successful entrepreneurs who had scaled business and had successful outcomes. So definitely involved both at UCLA and then the community at large. But it wasn't until I got into Colorado where I became more involved in kind of the building out of the community itself and not just a participant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you walk us through some of the top value you gained from being a participant in California, and then the top value you found by actually building out the community?
Yeah. I would say in California I was probably, as I mentioned, more focused on being a participant. And so the primary goal is, essentially networking. I've always worked in, business operations, sales, and revenue generating roles. And so the value of your network, obviously in that world, is important, as it is with anyone that's, interested in kind of growing their career, but especially in the sales and revenue side. The difference, being involved in Colorado, being a part of the foundation, it makes it much more interesting, and quite frankly, to do that, it's a little bit more altruistic. Although I think any type of community building and giving will come back over time. It's probably less tangible in the short run, but the idea that you're building a community not just for yourself or your own company, but a platform that others can build upon, stand upon, help them grow their careers, their companies, their industries. And it's been very rewarding here in Colorado. I remember going to the first Startup Denver breakfast we had, and I think it was at the Holland and Hart offices, downtown Denver. Maybe just a dozen or a few dozen people that attended that first meeting. And from there to see what it's become, culminating with Denver Startup Week here in a few short weeks. So it's exciting. And again, I think any involvement, we encourage our team to all the time, whether it's, last week we're at an ad tech meetup event that was here at Epic Brewing, which we're involved in. This week we've got a Built-in Brews, I think on Thursday, over at the Raleigh offices here in Denver, so we're going to have some team attend those. And again, it's not just for the benefit of choozle, it's for the benefit of these people's careers, their network, their community, to be participating, to give a little bit, and they'll definitely get it back as well.
Shakers, listen to Andrew when he brings up the points of participating versus building a community. If you've already been participating in a startup community, consider building it and getting involved and making that time investment to build your community. A rising tide lifts all boats. We've heard multiple times on this video series, Shakers. So consider more than just participating, and if you're not participating, get involved today. So anything to add to that on community?
Yeah, no, and I think it's important for companies. At choozle we've progressed through a few rounds of growth and funding, and now we can actually be a financial contributor as well and sponsor events and host them. So we're really excited to be a part of that side of the community as well. So not just on an individual level, but on the company levels as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can make that investment to not worry about whether you're a profitable company or just a pre-revenue company or someone retired, if you can make that investment to sponsor events, you get to hang out with other people who are sponsoring events, which the value of that's very difficult to measure, Shakers, but it's very obvious that it actually has a tremendous value compared to many other places you could spend your time or money, especially when looking short-term versus long-term.
Yep.
Perhaps there's a more concise way to say that, but Shakers, I hope you get the point. So let's move on to expert feedback from experts. When choozle was a new company, surely you had questions that you didn't have the answers to. How did you get in front of people that you thought might have the answers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think probably one of the most important building blocks of any community is just basic one-on-one networking. I've always done it in my career, and again, it's not dissimilar to community building. Networking takes time, it takes investment, it takes the ability to find out who people are, contact them in a way that's going to be mutually beneficial, which I think is really important. You don't necessarily want to be, you don't ever want to be just a taker in the system. In finding those people, understanding, being adept at identifying what question I want to get answered, finding the right person or the right company, and knowing that you might not get to that person right away. You might find someone that knows that person, or grab coffee with someone in that company, and they'll open up a few more doors for you that allows you to get to the folks that you really need to talk to. And so I always take it as an opportunity when I'm looking to find answers, which I'm still doing on a daily basis, whether it's understanding, strategically where we're going as a company and how we need to develop our product. I'll always take the opportunity to meet with folks, and again, hopefully they're going to get something from me, but in return, they're going to open up a few more doors for me as we progress through the conversation. And on the other side of that too, on the personal networking, I always go out of my way. You know, we participated here locally with the Denver intern program, which I think was also through Startup or Built in Colorado. And we hosted an event here and I spoke on culture. I think I had at least 4 or 5 different people reach out for private one-on-one meetings, which I'm more than happy to do. And as a founder and someone that's growing a business, it's easy to think of those as a time suck or, you know, these aren't contributing to what I'm doing right now with my current company, but it's so important. And again, it's more of an altruistic, you know, kind of deeper building a level, again, through one-on-one networking that helps develop that foundation as it goes. And again, quite frankly, sometimes you'll find out something interesting from these younger people that are aspiring in their careers. They may eventually be someone that you want to hire, which has certainly happened here at choozle many times. It may be that they give you some interesting perspective on a product or an idea that you weren't even thinking about. But most importantly, it's about giving something to them so they can progress their careers. And that reaps dividends, you know, all the way down the road. You know, and I still keep in touch with several people that have opened those doors for me, even if it was just networking as I was developing my own career. And I still do it all the time, upwards and downwards. Yeah, so.
Yeah, wow, two great points, Shakers, that I'd like to highlight that tie in with previous conclusions with past handshaking guests. First, if you rewind our video with Scott Yates from Blogmutt, he started 3 different companies with the same founder because he invested in the personal relationship before investing in just the current startup that they were working on. And he reaped the benefits of that, and I think that's kind of to your point, Andrew, on why it's important to take those meetings.
Yep.
You know, you're looking decades in the future instead of just months in the future. And I think there's a huge value on that when you put the emphasis on just being a human with someone.
Yep, absolutely.
And then the second point that I think Andrew alluded to, Shakers, is what multiple past handshaking guests have said, which is mentorship is about a mutual giving and taking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the mentor giving advice to the mentee. It should hopefully go both ways in some sense or another. And you know, sometimes a mentee can provide perspective from a role that you might not have been expecting, you know, as an outsider of the company. And hopefully that can be valuable to the mentor. But either way, whatever it is, make sure you're giving back to your mentors, Shakers. Let's see, what else on feedback, Andrew?
Yeah, and the way I think about it is, let's assume most companies have a product that's worthwhile and has found some sort of product market fit, and they have a strategy that they're executing on. And again, the real X factor, as you learn, especially when you start companies, is the people themselves. And it may sound cliche, but it truly is. And the ability to attract and retain high quality individuals to grow with is paramount. And so all of these building blocks, networking, one-on-one, being a part of the community, you're really building a brand for your company, which is especially important locally and for us as we're growing nationally. And so that means when there is a particular job opening or we need to grow into a certain space, we have a lot of high quality applicants because they've heard of this company that's doing some cool stuff. And quite frankly, it's a cool place to work at. And so we take every opportunity, and whether or not we hire someone, you know, we're always looking to represent our company in the best way, help out however we can, because we know even if we don't have a business relationship with that individual or that group, it only helps us to bolster our overall reputation in the local community and nationally, which makes us more competitive when we're looking to hire the best people.
Absolutely. Could you tell us a little bit about this building that we're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been here for about 4 months. Our first home was in Galvanize, the original Galvanize. We were one of the first companies to jump in there. We had 4 desks to start, so this would have been in the fall, right when it opened in October of 2012. And that was our home for almost, a little over a year. And then when we moved from 4 desks into a little mini suite up top there, and we reaped the dividends of being a very vibrant community. And Galvanize, especially at that time, was such a cool place and time to be a part of the startup community in Colorado. It lived to its mission of kind of galvanizing the community, especially in Denver, and gave us a home, a place to have events, to share ideas, to meet, quite frankly, to bump into people, to have those creative collisions, no matter where you were at in the building. So that was a really neat place to really incubate the early stages of choozle. Then we got a little bit bigger, and we moved into an office in Lower Highland, a great space, pretty small, we had about 1,000 square feet, and pretty open. We really enjoyed that space. That's where we kind of grew into a viable company, if you will. We raised our Series A while we're still in that space, but eventually it became way too small for us. So the building we're in now, we moved into in May of this year. We found it through one of a local real estate pro who specializes in working with startups. His name's Andrew Blaustein, found us this space, and the neighbors are an architect. It was cool because we found the building while they were still basically gutting it.
Yeah,
and this is
cool.
An old industrial building that they used to use to put industrial bed liners in trucks. And so, the windows both on the front and the back, those are actually big industrial garage doors over 20 feet tall. So it was nice, we got in early enough, we were able to help kind of shape the building. The mezzanine that we see over here wasn't part of the original plans, but we asked them to invest in that so we'd have more space. So now we've got a great, kind of modern yet still industrial space. It's been great for our company, just on the tangible things, actually having rooms to be able to meet, places to have conversations and breakout groups and sales calls and sales meetings. Engineering discussions, whatever it may be, but also the ability to have a home, a place people feel comfortable coming to, enjoy working at. We're basically here at 23rd and Curtis, near the intersections of Broadway and Park, very up and coming neighborhood. River North's just to the north of us. So those of us on the team that are younger and actually go out a fair amount, there's plenty of social opportunities around here. So it's been a great home for us to kind of take us to the next level. We currently have 17 local employees here, 20 totals, but 17 here in the Front Range. And we could probably go to over 40 in this particular space.
Nice.
So we're excited to call this home for the next few years.
Yeah, very exciting. Love the ping pong table and keg.
Yeah,
you guys have downstairs too.
Yeah, starters got to have ping pong or some sort of game. Keg, of course. We've got bean bags that we can toss in the parking lot. It's cool. And we're close to the ballpark. We've got a suite tomorrow night, so we're taking the whole team to the baseball game tomorrow night.
Nice.
A few local clients as well. That's great. We can just park here and walk over to the game. So should be a lot of fun.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Shakers. So let's see what Andrew has to say about mentors. And to start us off, could you tell us who was your first mentor and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up, kind of studying business probably more than the average young person does. Read some great biographies early on, and was able to have direct exposure first through my father, who was a businessman, and he took an entrepreneurial leap when I was about 13. He jumped into business with his first cousin, Jim Lynch, who had already started a very successful company called Sitel that played in the telecommunications space, the teleservices space. So it was really cool. I got to see them in my formative years really grow a company that was really pretty small. I think when my dad jumped on board, they were doing less than $100,000 a month in revenue. And they grew into a global leader in the space, took the company public several years later, and really got to see what it was like from the inside as those two really grew that company in particular. And it gave me a tremendous amount of access and insight to folks who were doing it. So it was both, kind of early mentors and certainly an inspiration for me.
Wow. And then could you kind of tell us how mentorship played in with when you were participating in the California communities, and then also here in Denver? Yeah,
I think everywhere I've been, every company I've worked at, again, it kind of ties into the one-on-one networking. A lot of that is essentially mentorship. You're not necessarily reaching out to people just because you think they might help your career by your service, but you are looking for people to learn from. And so whatever industry I was, primarily in digital media sales early on, I would always seek out those who are successful, whether they're competitors or otherwise, to pick their brain. And that started a lot of friendships, quite frankly, but also opened up a lot of insight and eventually opportunity to learn from those folks as well. So pretty much every company along the way, and I've kept in touch with a lot of those folks, at every company, and it's always interesting. It almost always comes back to help to have that deep network the next time you do something else.
Yeah.
And so I've had many. I wouldn't say mentors in the sense that I would visit with them once a week or things like that, but more just kind of general business mentoring folks that I was reaching out to. And if I had a question or a problem, always people that I could turn to at every instance of that.
Yeah, that's really neat. And then when you were actually building Startup Denver and Startup Colorado here, you mentioned Eric Matisek, who's been a past handshaking guest, and he'd be a great mentor for many of the Shakers out there.
Absolutely.
Did you find some mentors, maybe Eric, maybe others, in that process?
Yeah, I think Eric was certainly a mentor to me in terms of the local community. I met him shortly after I had moved here, and I remember our first meeting down in Riverfront Park, and you meet someone and you just know that they're going to be likely both a friend and someone that's going to be important in your career and in your development. And so I've always kept in touch with Eric. I just met him again, last week. We had a beer just to generally catch up. There was no agenda. There was no reason for us to do that. And of course, out of it came, two great introductions for Eric, for me, and in turn, I'm introducing him to some folks as well for some of the upcoming programming options that they have. So that's one instance of a local mentor, again, who's become a friend and an associate. He's done such a great job of catalyzing the community, originally around Startup Denver, now built in Denver, and is the head of the CTA. Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, one other thing we've learned here is mentors are more vested in your success if you're if you're texting them for a happy hour tonight, instead of emailing for a meeting next month. How does, assuming it's the right type of mentorship that could be a friendship, how could one of our shakers bring a mentor a little closer to their life to catch a happy hour? How does that happen?
Yeah, I would always suggest, it's always easier when you get an email if someone's offering something for you. And again, it doesn't have to be tangible. It could be something as small as, hey, I saw you were connected to this particular person, or hey, I saw you're involved in this charity. Here's an article I saw that you might find interesting and relevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not always just an ask. The idea that it's always going to be a give and a take, and especially, some of the best mentors are obviously going to be some of the most successful people. Successful people's most precious commodity is always going to be time. And so if you can do things that are in a succinct and concise way, and even if it's somewhat arbitrary, but offering them something, whether it's some insight, some ideas, a potential introduction, that's always helpful, because that's showing that you're also altruistic and interested in building a long-term community as well. And I think that can help get past either an email stage or past an original drink or lunch. And so I would say, people always appreciate persistence if it's polite, and appreciate people, again, that are willing to show some thoughtfulness before reaching out. If someone just sends a LinkedIn request with no other information on it, I'm not inclined usually to add those folks to my LinkedIn network, just as a small example. If it's cold, but they've done some research and said, hey, I saw that you guys raised some capital, or you recently featured in XYZ, this is really cool, here's what I do, here's what's interesting, here's why I want to talk to you, and have a reason to make it interesting, it makes it that much more likely that you're going to connect with someone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So one last question before we move on to the action item. You said you moved here to Colorado for the lifestyle. If you and, say, a mentor have a little bit more time than to catch a quick beer after work, what are some of your favorite activities to do?
I enjoy a various amount of activities, including skiing, snowboarding, fly fishing is one of my newest hobbies, golfing. All of them I don't get to do as much as I'd like, because I have a baby at home, 3-year-old son, well, not a baby anymore, my gosh, and then a baby, in choozle. So my time is fairly limited. But yeah, if you can do alternative activities, I would say grabbing coffee. And I prefer when people suggest coffee to me. Sometimes, especially if you have a young family, it's easier to do things that are on the clock, so to speak, versus after hours. Being creative, we've taken partners and clients and mentor folks, we've taken them to shooting ranges, we've obviously, even choozle here, we've been doing, 6 a.m. tea time, so we get 9 holes in before work actually starts,
very cool.
Which has been a lot of fun.
The Rockies game tomorrow.
Yeah, Rockies game tomorrow. It's, again, I think if you're the one reaching out to someone to try to suggest something, it's not a bad idea, and probably, I'm sure people have been more creative than I have about suggesting something different, hey, let's do this, or hey, let's go for a walk on your lunch, so we can stretch our legs, something that might be a little bit out of the ordinary, might help break through a little bit as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. Lots of knowledge bomb shakers. Get out there, connect with your mentors. Polite persistency, I think was a good one. Something a little bit out of the ordinary, and most importantly, a reason. Have a why you're reaching out to that person. And make sure you always keep your relationship with them respectful and convenient and full of value on both sides. So let's move on to, unless there's anything else to add to that.
No, I think we're set there.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the action item, shakers. Andrew, if there's one thing our shakers can do immediately after this video to help them on their entrepreneurial journey, what do you recommend?
I'd recommend getting out of your comfort zone. I think it's easy, probably especially in a digital age, if you're trying to build something or network, it's very easy to go on LinkedIn and maybe send out a handful of requests and feel like you're doing something. I would encourage everyone to physically go to an activity, get on meetups, find out what's going on in your area. Start a meetup if there's nothing specific to your actual area of interest or expertise, but physically go out there and do it. And I still have to, even at this stage of my career, I still often have to force myself. It's much easier for me to say, oh, I'm going to go home, or want to do another outside activity, but to go to an event, to get out of my comfort zone, meet 3 or 4 people that I haven't met before, make myself available to meet other people as well. So I guess the succinct piece of advice is get out of your comfort zone, go to an event, and make that somewhat often uncomfortable and can be awkward introduction to someone you don't know. And get out there, shake their hand, say hi. And again, that person may not be the exact person you want to meet or need to meet, but if they're a good person, they're going to help you on your journey, introduce you to other folks as well. So get off the couch and get out of your comfort zone and go meet a few people.
Boom. Get out there, Shakers. Go and spend some quality time face-to-face with some people to get started. So last but not least, Andrew, where can we find you and your company?
Yeah, so the company's called Choozle. That's CHOOZLE. We're at www.choozle.com. You can easily find our Twitter handle and Facebook page as well. We're pretty prominent in the community. We're down here in, I guess it's River North kind of area. If you're ever inclined to come visit us, feel free to drop in at any time. And we're going to be hosting several events during Denver Startup Week. I think we're going to be hosting part of the startup beer crawl here at Choozle, and then individually we've got team participants, I think 3 other panels, so we'll be out and about all throughout Denver Startup Week. Check us out online if you want to learn more about what we do, of course. There's information there. We'd love to chat with you guys, so yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, well, Shakers, thanks for your time. We'll see you next time.